I'm Claudine Wong, joining you from KTVU in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm joined by Matt Sambuli, who is the CEO and co-founder of Fishbowl, which is a way to really kind of just tap in to how employees around the country are feeling. It's kind of the digital fishbowl, right, Matt?
That's right. A bit of a digital water cooler. So Fishbowl is a workplace social network where verified employees can come and speak candidly and anonymously about workplace topics. And that's taken on a new meaning now with this work from home quarantined environment. And professionals taking there to answer surveys and answer surveys and questions that others pose.
Yeah, the water cooler concept is so interesting, and I think COVID, in this COVID world we're living in, it is kind of the only way we can get around the water cooler anymore is to get online and do it. But I think it's kind of more important than ever. You've covered very important, serious topics, and then you've also covered lighter ones.
Correct. Yeah. So in the past, we've covered topics like how are professionals de-stressing, like what's from this new work from home environment. Unfortunately, we found that 42% of professionals are drinking while on the job. Saddening statistics. 54% of professionals are fearful of layoffs. So those are some of the more serious surveys we've run towards our professionals on Fishbowl. More recently, we were really intrigued by this idea, partially based on our own employees. We saw a lot of our own employees at Fishbowl, around 30 strong, adopting a more casual look for virtual meetings. And we're curious about this, virtual meeting habit, this Zoom meeting habit, and how it impacted people's professional appearance and attire.
Well, it's an interesting idea too, because I think, in the beginning, we kind of treated our work from home like work, just at home. And now it's kind of home where we're working, I think, as,
Right.
as it's extended into however many dozens of days that different people are in around the country, that I think it's kind of just changed. And it's an interesting survey as well. We'll get into some of the results, but I think because when you talk about companies saying maybe this is going to be, the longer term solution, maybe people won't come back, it is changing, how casual Friday, maybe casual Monday through Friday. And I also think people's tolerances of it, because I think sometimes when I see people very dressed up from their at-home workplace, I'm like, wow, you really, you really made an effort. Some people wearing, even our late night talk show hosts are wearing hoodies and, making it
Right.
clear they're at home. They didn't
Right.
go to work.
I think it's the new normal. You hit on the nose, right? In the typical world, the non-COVID world, you would notice the opposite, kind of that the professional maybe had a rough night out, maybe a late night out, so to
Yeah.
speak. Now it's if you're dressed normally and your hair is combed over and you're neat, it's like, wow, you're looking good today. So it's very much the new normal, and it has to do with what you said. This blur between where your personal and work life ends and begins. It's really unclear because you're working and living in the same environment, and that's become very clear in the discussions we've been hearing on Fishbowl professionals too. So it's definitely new normal, and for some people though, it's a good thing. They
Yeah.
prefer the casual look.
Yeah, it can be nice. All right, let's pull up some of the exact results that we've had. So let's talk about makeup and how makeup routines have changed since the work from home started. 54% completely stopped wearing makeup. And I'm in a different industry, but I couldn't stop completely. So I think that really actually surprised me, that people, unless they're not doing video conference calls or others,
They're doing
they
they're
are.
they're doing these are, yeah, particularly our professionals. So we, our professionals are, knowledge, more white collar oriented professionals. We surveyed over 10,000 verified employees, companies like Amazon, Google, banks, consulting firms. So these are definitely professionals who are on not just, coworker calls, but they're on,
Hmm.
client calls as well. And so for that survey, we asked, how has your makeup routine for female professionals, how has your makeup routine changed since working from home started? And yet 54%, in some of the discussion that we saw emanating out of this poll, because that's kind of the Fishbowl
Yeah.
experience, they talk about it as well. We heard a lot of stuff like, they feel a little more free and at liberty to adopt a casual look while taking meetings from home, and kind of the point we were talking about earlier, that it's just less formality is necessary. And in some cases, it was preferred for some female professionals. So that 54% number surprised us a bit, but not all that much given the volume of discussions that we saw about this topic, and how female professionals were dealing with it.
Well, I think also maybe, the computer camera, depending on what it shows, sometimes you can't tell anyway. You might be putting on a great deal of makeup, but you're not in person, and maybe you have terrible backlight and you don't have a great anything anyway. So, maybe it all just works into that equation, because 7% only at the same amount. I can see people who never,
Yeah.
wore it at all, or stopped wearing
Yeah.
it regularly. They just put it on, but only 7%
Seven.
saying I'm sticking to the same thing is also a really surprising number.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a point, reason to what you said. Even more recently, being in the tech space, there's a number of new kind of Zoom technologies that are launching now that are about just that, minimizing the surface area on your desktop that's dedicated to your face, because you really need to, constantly 24/7 in that hour call, see that other person coworkers, but you don't need to. In some
Mhm.
cases, you're minimizing the window. In some cases, the grid view of like a group call of 30 professionals, and you may not be seen. So I think that's part of it for sure.
You're like, what is the point? If I think it also, I would think people are also, maybe they're going for a run on their lunch break or doing something else, and they don't want to have their heavy makeup
Multitasking.
and, yeah,
Yeah.
their lashes on for that that next session there, I guess. All right, so
Right.
let's go to shaving habits. I'm assuming this is mostly men. I don't want to make the assumption,
Men.
but men
Well, so we actually targeted this
and,
way. So it
mustaches.
was male professionals. Yeah, so
Okay.
it was male professionals. The first survey was targeted towards female professionals. The second was towards male professionals. And we asked them the question, have your shaving habits changed since work from home started? So from the male side, surprising results, maybe not to the degree on the female side, but 30% of men answered that they stopped shaving, and around 41% answered they'd reduced the frequency. So that
Oh,
30%, we
cool.
really wanted to understand a bit more, like, what does that mean? And as it turns out, a number of men, and again, this came out in the discussions, we're talking about adopting beards. They started growing beards, and that became their new look, so to
That's
speak.
yeah, I've seen it called, the sip look, or their Corona look, or as my friend called his, the Corona comb over, because he stopped shaving his head as well. So
Right.
there's a lot of different ways to interpret this. Do you think it's the same, kind of idea as the female employees that you surveyed, is, kind of what's the point? It doesn't really matter. I think, men's facial hair, or the hair on their head, or however you look at it,
Right.
whatever they're doing. Um, I also think that's a fairly acceptable thing. They could have grown out their beard anyway, and
Right.
so without the motivation of feeling like they want to have some clean shaven look, you know,
I think
that.
that plays into it. Yeah, I think depending on the city you're in, it's, the beard look was already in socially, again, depending on the city you're in and your kind of group, and maybe that's put them over the edge. And it was just, again, in this world where you don't know where your personal work life ends, begins, and you're multitasking, it's just kind of easier to go with the beard.
Yeah, and then and maybe it's a way to mark time too. Like how many days, how long
Right.
your beard can get before you're like, okay, I've now officially been in the house too long.
That,
Okay, this
that's the
one
most part of it.
this one makes me laugh too, because people in television they've always joked that everyone's wearing sweatpants and or shorts, while especially the sportscasters are infamous, right? They wear the shorts and then the suit and the jacket and the tie, above the anchor desk.
Right. Right.
Well, now everyone's living that world.
Yeah.
Apparently,
Yeah.
from your survey. So 3% in professional attire. Although I will say,
Right.
when I see some of my colleagues, they're in a full like dress that I would normally wear to the studio, I give them extra points. I'm like, you get props, because you are now sitting on your kitchen table or wherever, fully dressed.
Right. They're the minority now. It's the new norm. The new normal is the opposite.
3%. That 10% though, that's concerning.
That was surprising. So look, yeah, the vast majority still answered, 75% that they were wearing PJs, sweats, shorts, or leggings,
Mhm.
kind of under the fold, but
Yeah,
below the
which
belt,
makes
and that
sense. Yeah.
makes sense, right? Yeah, totally. It's above the fold that matters. But 1 out of 10 answered they only wear underwear, and that, like, it's not that high, but it's still high enough. It gets gets you curious, your eyebrows raised, and so again, there we actually dug in, look at the conversation on professionals that we're having, and it really did, the discussion volume backed this up, where we saw, it's a thing of lore now, that the gaffes with the media reporters, like stepping out and, exposing their
Yes.
soccer short. And that
Yes.
was the number one gaffe that was, reported by our users in the discussion threads, of like, specifically momentarily stepping out and the client or the coworker seeing their undies or their soccer shorts, like, and hilarity, honestly, in terms of the way they were describing it. So given the volume of discussion we saw about that particular moment, the 10% actually
Made
started making
sense.
sense. Yeah, it made
Well,
sense.
there was that infamous, you know, screen grab of a reporter doing the same thing and getting caught, maybe not
Right,
being dressed head to toe. But
right,
I think, what's interesting to me about these surveys too, if 75% of people are wearing leggings, it does, or sweatshorts or pajamas or whatever, you know, it does bind us in a way that it shows the commonalities of us all, right? Whether
right.
someone's in their, $5 million house or their apartment, at the end of the day, we are all the same, in terms of wanting to be comfortable while we're working from home. And maybe that's the thread that binds us all is
Yeah,
comfort.
there's a bit of an equalizer there for sure, and that just really made more transparent now, given the extreme environment we live in. One other point that came up too that's interesting is, this idea of virtual meeting fatigue that our users spoke about, and more
Hmm.
recently, I think there was a Harvard Business Review study about this. They called it Zoom fatigue, and as it turns out, the way you process information over video is different, right? On a video call, the only way to show the other person or participant that you're paying attention is to look directly at the camera and sustain attention for periods of time. And that's really tiresome. In the real world, you rarely stand 3 feet away from someone and stare at their face for a sustained period
Right.
of time. It'd be considered awkward. So it's very tiresome. And I think some of what we're seeing is a backlash against that, to be frank. And people adopting a more casual look and, different ways of being casual because there's still a level of formality with this video conference call dynamic that just it's a bit much.
Yeah, I think you and I both agreed that we're we're more tired today than we were at day 1, day 10, day 20. I would imagine, and based on what you're seeing as well, that we are in the process of reopening. It appears, throughout the
Mhm.
country, but as it extends and people maybe stay and work from home, because reopening doesn't mean everything goes back to normal. Obviously, we
Right.
might all be working from home a little bit longer, even if we can go curbside pickup at a retail store. um, how that will continue to progress, because it seems to me that if you had done this survey on day 10, you wouldn't have gotten the same results as you're getting now.
Absolutely not. Yeah, I think there's a habituation there effect where people, I should say, are professionally getting used to kind of this perhaps becoming the new normal and therefore adopting these new ways and habits. I could almost assure you, had we run this day one of COVID shutdown, we would not have seen results like this.
Yes. And how are people responding to these surveys as well? I mean, in all your platforms, do you send out these surveys too? Because you obviously have everyone grouped. You have the healthcare workers, you
Mhm.
have the teachers, you have a lot of different, industries. When you send out the survey, it goes to all the members in the fishbowl.
So depending on the survey and how we target it, so sometimes we target it by a specific cohort, so a specific professional group, or sometimes by gender and profession, as we did for the makeup and shaving survey. It's all in app, so it's actually the users, reading discussion content, Twitter-like content with other professionals, and then there's a survey that we serve to them in the feed. So it's very kind of casual, dynamic, and easy to answer, and we're able to get a very big volume of responses in a short period of time. In this particular survey, just in over a day, we were able to get over 10,000 respondents. But
That's pretty
generally,
good. Yeah. I mean, I think people are actually happy to answer. These are
yeah,
easier questions to answer as well. They're not ones that necessarily are impactful to the very stressful things of their lives, but it's kind of
right,
fun. I mean, how many things on
right.
social media have we seen that, like, count this number of tennis shoes, or
Right. And then they get to follow up on the discussion. So that's a really cool part. So with these surveys, once they answer, they have the ability to click through and then pretty much talk about the survey with other professionals. And that's what we use to kind of back up the results of it and understanding like what was in the psyche of our professionals, like what's causing them to answer this. And some of the juiciest pieces, actually, really interesting anecdotes, come from the conversations that emanate out of the surveys.
Yeah. And some of your answers are for some of your questions, I should say, that you ask are very, pivotal to an industry, to their fears and how they're, and that I think is the core of what you guys are doing there. But how do you think these other questions, which are fun and they are funny, and I think there's some maybe unrecognized value in that too, of just, some of these threads that we can all kind of agree on of what we're doing. I mean, that's why I think the numbers are so big. 75% are,
Yeah.
are doing this, and 70% of men are either, not really shaving as much, or, not shaving at all. Like it does a commonality again to it.
The commonality is key, and I could tell you for the first time in Fishbowl, since the work from home COVID environment started, we launched a cross industry bowl where we grouped all professionals together. This was healthcare doctors with teachers, with lawyers, with accountants, with creatives. It was fascinating, and we called it the Coronavirus Work Life Bowl. And we did that because we had assumed, because of these new this new environment and the way people are working, there were going to be commonalities that they can share and notes that they can compare. And so a lot of the surveys that we run more recently have been in this particular grouping, this cross-industry grouping, because I think for all the points you just noted, there's just a lot of commonality of experience that people are having, independent of who they are and where they work.
Yeah, and it truly goes back to that we are all in this together, whether we like
Right.
it or not, and that's how we will get through it. We will, in fact, get through it together. So it was a fun discussion, Matt, and talking about how you guys are really, getting the pulse on the water cooler, and how people are feeling, and certainly I appreciate you sharing the results.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Matt Savoli, who is the CEO and co-founder of Fishbowl, joining us to talk about these new survey results. And for more information and more interviews, you can go to coronavirusnow.com. Thanks so much for joining us.